So I've been talking about how that system of control and exploitation operates. The important follow up is what do you do instead? Because if you want to look inside to come to your own conclusion about what you should do, what you think is best, then you're only going to be grabbing the solutions they already gave you. We know this. If you're at a meeting at your company and the boss walks in and says, I want you to solve this problem, and I had an idea about how to solve it, and here's my idea. Okay, now you think of ideas. We already know that when they presented their solution, you will now only think of solutions that are similar. You get stuck on rails. So if you look inside and try to come to your own conclusion, you're just going to come to their conclusion, the one they already fed you in decades of media. And you're going to feel so excited that you finally found your true source when you're just regurgitating someone else's answer. So instead of pretending that you're smart enough to figure things out, you got to be honest about the fact that you're not. And that's why you're still stuck. Because you're not smart enough to figure things out. And the way to find how to figure things out is never going to be picking your favorite, the one that calls to you. Well, if you're not smart, you're only going to pick the one that isn't smart. And that's not smart. You're going to have to pause and look at the actual outcomes and see who has a track record of success at generating actual outcomes. And I know most of you are so deluded that you think money counts. Money is not an actual outcome. Neither is fame. An actual outcome means, did the bridge fall down? Did the design that they implemented in 20 countries function better when it was measured than all the other designs? When they made an analysis of what would happen to the economy, was that what did happen later? That's the real world outcomes. If you're looking at who's famous with money, that's a scammer. And if you try to listen to the scammers' solutions, you got scammed. So you're going to have to look at who has real outcome track record. And you can read my essays where I am accurately analyzing what the economy is going to do years later, and it did. Where I accurately assessed what major political powers were going to do, and then they did. You can look at when my designs are implemented, how well do they function compared to the other designs? They were better than all the others. I'm speaking from a place of actual accomplishment and competency. That's why I don't care if you like me. That's why I don't care if I look good or not. Because the only people who need to make sure that you like them and that they look good are the people who are trying to trick you into agreeing with them. You need to get used to measuring real results. And if you refuse to do that, it is your fault. You deserve to be scammed. You earned it. So if you want to run after the person who sounds nicest and says all the things you want to hear and it looks so slick, you got scammed. That's just what it is. And if instead you look at who actually invented the best design, who accurately predicted what no one else would predict. No one else was saying that, but they did, and turned out they were right. That's probably the better person to listen to. Especially if they do it over and over and over again. That's a track record. There's another categorical distinction. There's an error people make when they try to assess how to solve a problem. They don't ever learn statistics. They refuse because they were trained by public school to hate reading and hate math. They were trained because schools do not want you to think for yourself. They don't want you to be able to assess things accurately. They need you to be incompetent because that's easy to control. This has been a long track record of public schooling, going back to the very beginning. Public schools, I'll just mention this as an aside first. Public schools were invented as a result of a group of businessmen lobbying the government. The businessmen went to the government and said, we need to take all these farm kids and put them in public schools. And the government says, why? And the businesses say, well, business is booming. We've got all these water wheels that are powering industry with giant flywheel belts that snap and kill dozens of people at a time. And so we got all this business accounting to do. We got all these numbers to write down. And we got all these business receipts and invoices and legal documents. We need people to write copies because this was back in the 1800s. They didn't have typewriters. So they have scribes writing documents and doing accounts by hand. And they didn't have enough scribes. And because they didn't have enough scribes, the supply and demand was off kilter. There were not a lot of scribes, but there was a huge demand for scribes. And that meant the scribes got paid a lot of money. And that's when you see the Horatio Alger stories, where some plucky young kid becomes a scribe at some department, and then he's quickly making enough money to become successful in life, and that's the American dream, Horatio Alger. And that was a result of a shortage of scribes. So these businessmen said, we want to flood the market with scribes so that we can depress wages and save some money. So they lobbied the government to create the public school system. Get all these farm kids to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic. They don't want you to learn how to do mathematics. I tell people I'm a mathematician, they think I'm a calculator. No, calculation is not mathematics. They say I'm a mathematician means I'm supposed to be able to plug numbers into a formula. That's not what mathematicians do. Mathematicians learn the techniques of creativity and problem solving and argumentation so that we can prove without any doubt at all that our conclusion is definitely correct. And we use those techniques to create new theorems. We create new equations. So if you've never done that before, you have never done mathematics. You've only been calculating, plugging numbers into someone else's equation. And that's all they ever wanted you to do. They don't want you to learn creativity. They don't want you to learn problem solving. They don't want you to learn the techniques of argumentation that allow you to prove something without any doubt at all. They don't want you to have that. They want a scribe. So they would have you practice handwriting, practice spelling, so the business document looks nice. They want you to know how to do numbers quickly, and that's it. And they realized pretty quickly that they could also insert a lot of propaganda. I had this wonderful book on my shelf. It was the History of American History books, where they went back to all the American history textbooks in public schools, and they showed how the story being told about our own history changed every 20 to 30 years. As soon as they wanted you to believe a different story, they would rewrite the history book to teach that new story to children. So your list of books you're supposed to read in English class and the parts of our history that are taught to you in history class, all the things that they tell you are so important for you to be a good citizen, no, that's specifically propaganda. They never wanted you to be a good citizen because then they would have taught you about virtue and community service. They don't want you to be competent and successful in life, or they would have taught you about financial planning and they would have taught you how to file your own taxes. They don't want you to know the things that would actually make you succeed. They just want you to be a good scribe. So public schooling has never been designed to help you. The whole method that they used of having a bunch of kids sit in rows while one person stands on stage and lectures, that was based on the Prussian military. And it's indoctrination. You wear a uniform, You get the ruler slapped on your wrist. You listen to the lecture silently. That's completely different from the method of mentorship, which all the elites have used for 2,500 years. When the elites want their kids to learn something, they use mentorship, where it's a dialogue and they're working on a problem together. And they ask probing questions. That's when the elites want their kids to learn. You think about that. So that's my tangent on public schooling. But the main issue here is that when they present a solution to you over and over again, and then you feel so amazing choosing the option they gave you, you are not practicing the techniques of creativity, problem solving, and proof. And you're not following the person who had a real track record. You're following the person who has the most money and fame. And that's how they guarantee that you always keep screwing up your life and you keep running in that treadmill just like they wanted. So the track record says a very different thing than all the options in your narratives. And when people hear this other option that's different from anything they've heard before, their reflex is to try to dismiss it, either with fear, avoidance, or attack. And it's really obvious that they're not thinking clearly because none of their arguments make sense. So I was talking to a guy in my building and I was saying to him, "Hey, how you doing?" And he said, "Oh, I'm really stressed out. I'm working all the time. I'm so busy. I'm so isolated." And I was like, "Okay, well, I've already created the solution to that and it did work multiple times. You get a lot of people to move in together, and you can't just do some hippie commune. It has to be people who are different and tolerate and appreciate that difference without trying to force agreement and conformity. And to be able to do that, they need to learn the techniques of healthy communication and conflict resolution. And then if they do that, then they can split up errands and cooking and chores, and they can be supportive of each other in all kinds of real practical ways, not just saying nice words, so that they all save time and they save money. The people who make the most money keep doing their job, bring in the money. The people who get paid the least, stop working at your corporate job and put all your time into the house for the benefit of everyone. You got some older people who already paid off their house. They got a big house. They don't use all that space anymore. Move a bunch of young people in. Now the young people don't have to pay rent anymore. So they take the dollars they would have paid on rent and they start putting into a pooled fund to build up a capital reserve. When I say capital, I don't mean the Washington, D.C. I don't mean an investment portfolio. I mean, you're buying the equipment that you use daily to save time and money. Once you're saving that time and money, now you have a surplus of time and money. You can start working together on bigger goals outside of just survival. That's when you become a threat to the people who are trying to control you. Because they need to keep you distracted, running on that treadmill, barely keeping alive, just treading water. And that way, in your desperation, you grasp for any easy solution. What's the simple life hack that only takes 15 minutes because that's all I got? And they're always just feeding you what they wanted you to do. The life hack they told you is their instructions. So I tell him, let's set up another live workspace. Let's get 12 people living together. And his response was interesting. He said, "Well, I don't want to live with a group of people because currently living alone means I don't have to clean. And if I was living with a group of people, then I'd have to clean, and that would be stressful." Wait, you didn't hear me, did you? When you live in a group, you get to split the chores. You got some people who are staying home doing the majority of the housekeeping needs, cooking for everyone, which saves a lot of time and money for everyone. You're not spending as much money on DoorDash, so you don't have to work as many hours. You're not paying such an inflated rent, so you don't have to work as many hours. Now you got plenty of extra hours every month. And there's someone else doing each chore. Each chore, there's a different person doing it. And he didn't answer. Because he's just afraid of change. And he wants to complain. He doesn't want to actually have a better life. And that's the distinction. Most of the people who are complaining don't actually want a better life. They want to complain. So you have to be aware of that. And if you want to step out of the rat race, you have to be selective. Who's actually interested in doing something different? If you waste your time trying to convince them, then you've wasted your own time. So I don't try to sound extra appealing, presentation, slick suit. I don't try to make myself sound nice to trick people into agreement, because then I end up tricking people into agreeing and participating who are slackers, who don't actually want to do anything different from what they'd already been doing. They just want to complain. So if you don't want to change in a real way that's going to be uncomfortable because it's different and new, go ahead and fuck yourself. But if you live in a larger group and you learn the techniques for healthy communication and conflict resolution, you will save time and money by dividing the work. And then you'll have plenty of extra time to socialize and to plan the bigger things you want to do. So that I go into in a few different essays. There's anti-college. It's one of the essays. Anti dash college. Just search my name with the title. It'll pull up the free blog. Close their pop-up. There's also In Case of Apocalypse. There's Fight Club 2026. There's the Wolf Girl community essay. Just type in Wolf Girl. I've addressed it for a number of different scenarios, whether you're out in a rural environment or you're in a city, if it's people who are in your age bracket or people in your local community. There's lots of different details you can go into about how to organize that. So you're saving time on food, you're saving time on transportation, you're saving time on housekeep, and you don't need as many people earning money. And the people who are earning money don't have that other stuff to distract them and wear them down. And if you're unwilling to live in a community, hang alone. You'll suffer. You'll have a lot to complain about.